This is going to be a fun one.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good.
Maybe it'll be a short one.
Maybe this may be our short one for sure.
Just read it. All right, that's it. That's
all right. You guys have a blessed day now. Bye-bye.
That's
Cheerio.
all, folks.
Yeah.
Get the little pig out here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess let's just get right into this. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the Call for Fire podcast. My name is Zachary Allen.
Mike Sherbanenko.
And today we are on chapter 10, God is for you. And before I get into it, I'll always defer to Mike. Do you have anything that you would like to share with the audience about this one?
I think for this chapter, even like putting my life together was hard because I had to make the decision that God was actually for me, even though I wasn't in a good space. And even today, when I'm trying to maintain everything, sometimes I get in a little bit of trouble, like listening to other people's opinion other than going off of Jesus' examples specifically. So sometimes this can be a hard one for me, other times not so much. So that's kind of like my thoughts going into this right now.
Well, good deal. I just realized I left my glasses upstairs, so I'm going to have to hold the book a little closer to myself to read it, but
okay,
we'll be okay.
You can do the Ricky Bobby
be
thing right
here.
Now.
Be right here reading this book.
Yeah.
So my vision's not the worst, like actual vision. I just have really bad astigmatism. So everything's blurry.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the closer it is, the less blurry it is. And it's the same amount of blur, and it's like double vision too, where I'll see the letters superimposed on themselves. So the closer I get it to my eyes, the less double vision I have.
Yeah. So the dyslexia may be in full effect or something.
We'll see.
All right.
I'm just going to keep it close.
Yeah.
All right. There are times in our lives when we get to a place where we can't see the solution, even though it has been there the whole time. I've been in these places where the solutions have been so apparent, but I was the last to see them. It was as if everyone could smell me, but I couldn't smell my own funkiness. Quirky, I know, but you get the point. Truth be told, I was blinded by the negative feelings about myself. I believed the lies, and I didn't feel worthy of a new life, or even love. It hurt my recovery process. I know sometimes it is hard to trust people or even Jesus when things haven't gone your way, especially when it comes to your own well-being. Trusting can be difficult when it comes to your restoration and thoughts of a better life. It is almost impossible to think that Jesus wants you to be blessed, loved, and to feel worthy. Our human nature can cause us to feel like we are undeserving of his love or must fight to prove ourselves worthy of anything good. This is a lie. The love of Jesus can never be earned. He will never love you more or less than the very first day he created you. I know firsthand how difficult it can be to accept these tremendous God-given gifts when you feel you are not good enough. On my personal journey, I would get frustrated, angry, and many times felt inadequate. During these times, the Holy Spirit always came to comfort me. He will do this through people, godly thoughts, support, or even through the direction that is difficult to hear and take. He will never fail you. It's during these times that you realize the Holy Spirit is an awesome being. You become aware that Jesus is for you and not against you. You will gain confidence and wisdom knowing that you're never alone by experiencing a calmness coming over you and a peace settling within you. Jesus always comes through when you are waiting on him. There's only one condition. You must seek him, his word, and his promises for you. This is how God shows himself to you and reveals just how valuable and worthy you are to him. I often say that if you pray only when you're in trouble, you will always be in trouble. Place your troubles and insecurity in the hands of Jesus and receive the great truth that God is for you. And you have quite a few verses here. So, we'll tackle these one at a time. Psalms 23, 1-3. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Romans 8:31. What shall we say about such wonderful things as these? If God is for us, who can be against us? Romans 16:8. I know the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me. Psalm 94:1. When anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought me joy. Romans 8:38 through 39. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Psalm 27:1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? 1 Peter 5:6 through 7. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due times. Cast all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. And Psalm 118:6. The Lord is for me, I will not fear. What can man do to me? You went big on the verses there.
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
went. Yeah, I went big on the verses there because it's kind of like when I needed to read more of God's word and what He said about me than where I was presently when I was writing this, and also, I mean, we were upstairs before this podcast talking about different things about religion, the church, Christianity, and sometimes I get stuck. Like if I go to church on Sunday and a sermon, and I'm listening to a sermon, someone gives me their opinions. I can get stuck in their opinions other than what I should actually be getting, And
Yeah.
sometimes, like specifically, like in the maintenance phase, when I'm trying to like have good like meditation on the word, good like prayer, and listening to like good worship, and just trying to get in a good headspace. Sometimes I get stuck on like a specific opinion, or sometimes I let my boundaries down. And I let other people like bleed into there, and then them telling me like their opinions. It's kind of like I that's where I get stuck. So and I know like upstairs you were saying is like you need to concentrate it on Jesus's example other than the other examples.
Yeah. Before I get into that, I'll go back to something you said about opinions, and it's like there's that typically those old adages, those things that people say, puns, if you will, exist because they speak tremendous truth, but there's that one of opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one and they all stink.
Yeah.
Opinions are really tough because the opinion of Jonathan to David was a lot different than the opinion of Saul to David.
Yeah.
Even though Saul held in a position of authority over David, the opinion of his equal meant more to him. And it's because opinions from everybody don't mean the same thing. And you should be very selective on whose opinions you allow in, take in, and really pay any thought to. And I know we talked about this a little bit last week about like people's view of the world, people's view of reality, and that sometimes you can look at them and just be like, what did you experience in life this is how you see things? And it's like that with people's opinions too. It's like, well, what did you hear in that is now causing you to say the things that you're saying?
Yeah.
But on the subject of where we put our focus in the church, people's opinions obviously is one of those things we can get caught up in. But what I was really saying about Jesus is that if your focus in anything with your walk with God is anything other than God, Jesus, however you want to refer to him, the Trinity, you're doing it for the wrong reasons, essentially, is kind of what I was saying. Is you shouldn't be there because of the worship. You shouldn't be there because of the pastor. You shouldn't be there because of anything really other than God, anything other than Jesus, anything other than that specifically. Yes, those other things help, like going to a church with terrible worship music, probably rough. And if you don't respect your pastor, if you have a hard time respecting your pastor, then you're gonna have a hard time taking his authority and the things that he says. So like I get that it's not all about that, but at the same time, like those sound like personal character issues
Yeah.
that should probably be worked on outside of the church.
Yeah.
That's just my thoughts.
I had a side thought of what you just said, and it's completely different than like the religious thing or God is for you or anything like that. Have you ever heard of the old adage of Murphy's Law?
Yeah.
Do you know how
Like
it be?
the
Do you know?
anything that can go wrong will go wrong type thing.
Yeah, and the person who said that
He was a military guy, wasn't he?
one time, but then he got out and he became a professor
Okay.
of a university, and he actually invented G-force.
Okay, so that's the same guy.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and
Well,
he and
discovered the idea of G-force.
yeah, so he had like all these like cables and like all the stuff that he was putting into a simulator, and he knew that if he plugged the right cables in the right holes, that it would work. The problem is he had like 150 different cables and he couldn't figure it out. So the time before G-force was actually created by this guy, he said, "What can go wrong will go wrong." And then after he did that and he had the cables in the right order, G-force was invented.
Yeah.
And I was just like, the reason why I'm saying that to you is sometimes we have to watch what we say. And, because especially when I did this, I was trying to figure out if God was actually for me. I had to like watch what I was thinking. I had to watch what I was saying to other people. I had to like listen to the right people. I was like doing all this stuff. And before I even got a single victory moving in the right direction, because when I was writing this, Jenny was asking me for a divorce, and I was trying to figure out, God, are you actually for me here? What are you saying to me specifically? And I was just like, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. I'm like losing everything, Emily and Sophie are doing counseling because my PTSD was so bad. And I'm like going forward, I was like, man, I'm getting divorced. I'm trying to figure out whether I'm going to be a Christ follower and do this thing for real, or if I'm going to be a raging alcoholic. That's when this devotional was written. And I got to tell you, I wasn't picking Jesus at this point. I was at the point where I was like screaming out to God, and I was just like, God, are you actually for me here or not?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, in all honesty, this predicament really hits close to home because this is where I've been for the last 2.5 years. Really, I'd say 2 years, because for 6 months of living here, I guess I was just kind of caught up in the limelight of the new place. But like really trying to figure out like where is God in all this, because I feel so alone.
yeah.
So how can you be for me if I can't even feel you here? It's like, where's the support?
Yeah.
So like the idea of going through these really trudging through grady moments in your life, it feels like, I think that's a pretty normal thought. Where I struggle is getting out of that thought, because generally stuff turns around and things get a little bit better. So you kind of work your way out of it. But when things aren't getting any better, it seems like they're getting progressively worse. The amount of times I've asked even if God's real in this whole process is, it gets you in a tough place. So like, it's no wonder people have a question of if God is for you, if there's some people that are questioning his existence at all.
Yeah. Yeah, because when you're looking at like your recovery and you're trying to put things together, there's the acute phase, and then there's the really, it's like, okay, I experienced breakthrough. Then there's the maintenance phase. And we talked about this upstairs before this podcast, and I told Zach, I said, man, sometimes I really struggle with the maintenance phase, man, because, when you're in the maintenance phase, you really sometimes have to find that motivation to keep going, because, your family's kind of like getting over you having PTSD, you're still like seeing a counselor, your marriage is not in crisis mode anymore. So you can actually be in like the cruise phase there for a little sec. I'm just cruising and being on autopilot in your life when you struggle with PTSD. I mean, for me, I take medication, and people with bipolar, that's where they struggle the most. You know why? Because they think they have it figured out, and then they stop taking the medication, and then they do that slope and they go all the way down, and they're just like, and then they find themselves in center point again. They're like, well, how did I get into this thing? It's kind of like the same thing when I was looking at sometimes going to church, sometimes I don't feel it. And I'm sitting there and like, okay, I'm kind of getting into the worship, and then I'm getting into the word. And then either I get someone's opinion, and I'm just like, I'm not really sure if I should listen to that, and I'm really like trying to take it back and trying to move forward. But sometimes the maintenance thing is really hard,
Yeah. The maintenance phase is the hardest part.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes for mental health changes, physical health changes, especially because, let's say the window of change is this big.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, who knows? Let's say on the short end, 3 months, on the long end, 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have this much longer to live.
Mm-hmm.
That's all the maintenance phase.
Yeah.
So, what we do to create change in our life is such a blip on the reality of what we then have to replicate for the remainder of our existence.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough thing for a lot of people because it's like, I have to keep showing up.
Mm-hmm.
You mean I don't get a break now? Like, this is that burn the ships mentality thing of like, if you don't have that mentality of like, when I get to this new place, there's no option of going back,
mm-hmm.
that you're always going to go back if it's an option.
Do you think that there is like a the burn the ships mentality is easier if there is a physical destination to go to other than like a mental thing? Because I think like if I went to prison and I finally got better, then I'm just like, man, I got to keep on this phase or I know I'm going back to prison. Other than like, you kind of like, I know you've seen that picture of like a person that paints themselves into like their own prison. Like, I'm sure you've seen that.
Yeah.
So what, in your opinion, is better? Like the physical or is it the mental?
I think all of it is mental, and that just sometimes we wind up in physical restraints as well. But like, being fat is a prison, being mentally unhealthy is a prison.
Yeah.
Because everything can't exist outside of the walls that you create for yourself through those issues. If you're mentally struggling with bipolar depression and you think you can do it on your own, it's kind of narcissistic considering that most people can't. Like,
yeah,
you're the one person who's got it all figured out. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is like, you're essentially now creating a prison which you must live in order for this to work out. And as soon as you try to run from that prison, you're on the go.
Yeah.
You're on the run the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Until it all comes crashing down. And especially with like people with bipolar depression, because the manic high and the manic low are such intense it's a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation.
Yeah.
You hardly even recognize yourself in either one of those moods, and that's a big problem. Is there, where's baseline in manic high and manic low? So I'm continuing to use that as an example because it's a good example for the whole thing. But like, if you're struggling with this thing, it's something you're gonna like. People say, "Oh, I'm a recovering alcoholic."
Mm-hmm.
I'm still an alcoholic though, and it's like, I'm still a fat guy though.
Yeah.
I'm still a depressed person though.
Yeah.
And I'm in recovery of those things. But they still get me if I let them back in.
Yeah.
So when I say like when you got to burn the ships, it's like a better example is you can't have access to the keys to open the doors, to even unlock the doors, because that in like sometimes think about it like a shelf in a room in a house. And it's like there's 3 layers of protection there. Each one of those things has a lock on it, like
Mm-hmm.
a safe, a room, and then a house. Sometimes you have to restrict yourself to just not going in the safe. Sometimes you have to restrict yourself to not going in the room, and sometimes you can't even enter the house.
Right.
And there's different levels of those triggers for those things. And you have to spend the time to get mentally healthy to understand, is this a safe, a room, or a house issue?
Yeah.
If you're an alcoholic, maybe it's a house issue. I can't go around it. And for you, maybe it's I just can't have it in my home.
Yeah.
Like there's a difference between I can't even go to a restaurant where alcohol is served or be around someone who's drinking, and I just can't have it in my house.
Yeah. Yeah, for the drinking thing, it's if I know like a big tease for me is those shooters, those airplane
Yeah,
shots, whatever they call them now.
like the ones at the gas station by the
Yeah.
checkout register.
Yeah. So that's like a big like stumbling block for me because
Like
well,
the sneaky aspect. If I can
well,
just take
yeah,
a shot and be
who
done.
would know if I took a shot,
Who would know?
right? And I'm just like when I see I'm trying to pay at the pump and the pump's just not working, it says C cashier, I'm just like, "Oh man," you know? And it's and then I'll just move and I'll go to the next one or I'll go to another gas station and I'll pay at the pump because I'm just like, who would know?
Yeah.
You know, and I guess that lock and key thing is pretty big for me. And another big thing for me is I've been on this weight loss like fitness thing like we've talked about because of my back, and I'm trying to elevate myself to where that pain manager said, well, if you lose weight and you know you get stronger, the shots will take for longevity and hopefully they'll last for the rest of your life. And right now I think I've like plateaued, and for me it's like a mental thing because I think I'm actually gaining muscle but I'm not losing weight. So for me it's like a plateau. You know, am I losing like my belly fat? Yes. Am I losing like different fat over my body? Yes. But I think my mental thing, specifically, like you're saying, like the lock and key effect, is because when I get on the scale, I'm not losing any weight. Like I'll go in the shower, like I'll dry myself off, I'll get on the scale. I'm just like, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, damn, I'm not losing weight. How am I going to go and get my shots? And I don't want to put the thing off anymore because I know once I get the shots, then I know that, and then I do my rehab, then I'll feel a lot better. But then I do something really stupid. Like I tell my wife on Wednesday after we did this podcast of the last one, I can't remember what the last one was, but and I'm just like, hey, I'm going to do this 8-mile run. Well, guess what I did? I jacked up my leg, I jacked up my ankle, jacked up my back, you know, and then Jenny's like, how'd you finish? She's like, well, I finished like 70th out of like 400 people. And she's like, well, that's really good. I was like, yeah, but now my body's all jacked up. My ankle hurts. Went to my chiropractor. He's like, dude, what are you doing to yourself? I'm just like, well, I'm just trying to be better. And he's like, well, there's a difference of being better and trying to like do all this stuff, and there's a difference of you going out there and killing yourself.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, he's like looking at my leg, he's like looking at my ligaments, he's like poking my legs. I'm just like, dude, that really hurts. He's like, yeah, that's the point. I'm trying to like get you better, and you're like killing yourself here.
Yeah. You know, it's funny you actually mentioned that. I wrote a note in here based on something you said in the first paragraph, where the solutions have been so apparent, but I was the last to see them. And I wrote a note. It says, often last to see the change we need to make or the progress in the change we are making.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like that classic example of being too close to the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you are trying to lose weight and you get on the scale, and every single day, let's say you lose a pound. I know
Mm-hmm.
that's a crazy amount of progress, but when you're 400 pounds, you sometimes see that. Now, it's not all fat, but let's say you're seeing a pound a day, but you look in the mirror and you're only seeing a pound a day. You're not going to really see the difference of a pound the day before to the day of.
Yeah.
But, over a month, 30 pounds looks different.
Yeah.
But you don't see it because you see yourself every day.
Mm-hmm.
But the people around you who don't necessarily see you every day or see you in the same light as you see yourself are going to notice that change. And you're always going to be the last person to notice the progress that you're making and the changes that you desire. But also, this is something that I talked about it earlier with you off the podcast, is like, you have to be going back to that accountability mirror almost and being like, am I doing what I need to be doing in a way?
Right.
And playing a judge on yourself of like, if this is really my desire, am I doing the right things? If I want to get clean, safe, and sober, well, am I surrounding myself by the same people that that were not a good example for me? Am I getting involved in activities again that lead me down this path, a kind of lock and key situation here? There's all these things that you have to look at and see, but a lot of the time we are the last person to see those things, and then we wind ourselves back up in the same situation. And after you fail and F it up so many times, you hopefully start to pick up on it, because it could be different each time.
Yeah.
But like, I lost weight a lot of times and got fat again a lot of times. I quit using drugs a lot of times and picked back up drugs a lot of times.
Yeah.
And it's generally because I didn't burn the ship.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting is you said you being too close to the issue. Recently in March, I left the Dream Center. And when I left the Dream Center, I started surrounding myself with people. I'm not trying to put myself down here, but are a lot smarter than me in different areas. But you have to surround yourself with people who are a lot smarter than you in what they do.
Yeah.
And you have to surround yourself with people who think differently than you. And half the reason why I asked Zach to do this podcast with me, because Zach is a very thoughtful person, and he uses words very intentionally. And there was a time where Zach taught group, and I was like, man, that's probably one of the best groups I've attended in a long time. And he put a lot of thought, he put a lot of intention in what he's doing. And then I started surrounding myself with other people who were very thoughtful in their intention about the way that they were doing things. And it's interesting about what you said, that is, there are people that I would bump into that are like, said to me, is like, oh man, ever since you last left the Dream Center, you're a lot happier. Your countenance is different. It's like all this stuff is like when you're in the Dream Center, you're a lot negative. You're always being weighed down. It's like you don't have that anymore. You're a lot different. You're happier to be around. You're more happy-go-lucky. I think. And also during the last chapter, you can't smell your own funk is in that chapter.
Yeah,
I can tell you, like, mentally in the Dream Center, I would get so like focused on helping other people than helping myself. There were like times where I would be so exhausted, I would come home, I'd put Eli to bed, and I'd go right to bed, and I wouldn't even take a shower for like a day and a half, maybe 2 days. And I was just like, I really didn't care. And that came to the point where my family's like, hey, you've done enough. It's time to go.
Yeah. And you're the last one to see it.
Yeah, I was the last one to see it.
We're the last one to realize that we need to get on the boat.
Yeah. And then when I
real life
saver. Yeah, and then I asked Emily and Sophie this question. I said, should I leave the Dream Center? Should I leave? You know what they told me? They said, you have no idea what it's like for you to sow yourself and other people and them not appreciate it. I was like, well, I think they appreciate it. I was like, well, they may appreciate it, but we appreciate it more. And that was like a big key to me, is like, I don't think like I am appreciating myself and the things that I can do. And that's kind of like why I close a Thursday night group, is because I need to sow into people who are more intentional about fixing themselves.
Yes.
And that's why it's like, why we're doing this podcast, because I know it's like, even after we do this podcast and still on YouTube, it's still going to help someone, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. There was a couple things in what you just said there that were, I wish I would have stopped you on one of them, but I didn't want to
Sorry,
roll.
my bad.
Intentionality, you use that word. And I think that is a huge thing of the type of people that you surround yourself with, the type of people that you should be listening to their opinions. They're generally intentional people. They're someone that you describe as not doing things just for the sake of being there.
Mm-hmm.
Someone that you wouldn't describe as a little bit bipolar in a way. It's like they're either go, 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 or you don't see them at all.
Yeah.
And the reason why I kind of point that out, and sorry if you're that person, you know, me and you probably wouldn't get along, but it's just like, it's that idea of being able to not be involved in something and that being okay, but being able to be involved in something and being actually involved, like being very intentional with your time. Those are the type of people that are going to be intentional with their relationships and their friendships and value the input that you have into their life, and then thus try to reciprocate that on yourself. So intentional people, good to have around. The other thing that I was really thinking about with this was just how I'll stop there. I'll stop there because I don't want to get too far ahead. The intentionality thing, though, I'm still thinking about it, which is kind of why I want to go back before I move on from this. This is like the idea of, and look, calling myself out a little bit here, putting the phone down when you're around your toddler.
That's a hard thing for me.
Yeah, it's a hard thing for me, which is why I said it, because I like to just punch myself in the nuts. Like, like I said, you need to take an inventory of your life often. You need to play your own judge in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Where I go off the deep end a little bit is I do it a little too often. I seem to be the one making my life the hardest on myself because of all the things.
Yeah. Do you know there's specifically the phone thing?
Yeah, it sucks.
It does suck, but I think where I am incredibly lucky that for the place that I live is we don't have good internet. Like, we have good internet from 4 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock at night. We have great internet. You know what happens at 4:01? The internet somehow it stops working.
Everyone gets home from work and the bandwidth drops.
Yeah, and we don't get internet. So you know what happens when Eli gets home? He loves the baby shark thing. That's his deal. Baby shark, baby shark. You know what happens? I'm like, okay, here, buddy, knock yourself out. 401 hits, and he hates me. No more baby shark or something. He'll say something to me.
Yeah.
I'm just like, sorry, bro, no baby shark today.
Yeah. This has been a really tough thing for me. And look, this is going to sound terrible, but you're lying to yourself if you have or had toddlers and you don't believe this. They're kind of boring. You're in a stage where you can't really have full communication with them, but also they are a little bit hyper focused at times on things that they can become annoying.
Yeah.
But like if we were watching a show, I can't discuss the show with Teddy yet. The observations are, look at the green dino, or did you like that? And hope that he understands.
Yeah.
It's a little different as they get older, but this stage is kind of sucky. Like, as far as parenting, you're not quite to the stage of where you can actually teach and develop your kid, and it's more monkey see, monkey do. Yeah. That's what's more important.
You know, it's funny. I bought Eli chickens, and he
loves his
he
chickens.
loves his chickens. And I'm telling Eli, he's like, hey man, it's like he can go feed the chickens. I was like, but only 3 scoops. He's on
10
like
scoop guy.
scooper 9, scoop 10.
Yeah.
I mean, there's bird stuff
Spoiling
everywhere.
the chickens.
I'm just like, he's got the fattest chickens in Lincoln County, bro. I'm telling you right now. It's like he will go to like the store, and he knows what vegetables he likes to feed his chickens. He will go and he will buy like 9 or 10 cucumbers at the store, and he's like, oh, let's feed them to the chickens. It's like his chickens are the happiest chickens around, bro. I'm telling you right now.
Speaking of that frost came in the last day and wiped out my entire garden.
Dude, our vegetables are still going stronger. Tomatoes.
Everything died. Everything in a matter of 24 hours died.
Yeah, our tomato plants must be like the...
Dude, mine were looking real good just last week.
Yeah.
Fresh. I got tomatoes off of them.
Yeah, we have 3 plants still alive. 2 are tomato plants and one's a jalapeno plant.
I bring that up because I have 2 or more cantaloupes to give you for your chickens.
That's amazing. Eli's going to love you.
Yeah, they're split open from the cold, so figured chickens will eat them. Podcast conversations.
Yeah.
Another thing that I kind of wanted to talk about here a little bit was something in your second paragraph. It says, I know sometimes it's hard to trust people or even Jesus when things haven't gone your way. And like when I read that statement, honestly kind of pissed me off. Like, oh, it's kind of hard to trust Jesus. It's like, it's damn near impossible for me because look, a lot of the time we don't trust people because we associate that person with someone in our past who has caused us trauma or problems.
Mm-hmm.
So we inherently will not trust somebody because they remind us of something or a situation is somehow logged in that little amygdala telling us that this isn't a safe situation. Regardless of what it is, trust issues generally are learned behaviors. Why wouldn't we trust people?
Mm-hmm.
It's learned.
Yep.
So if the ability to trust or not trust somebody is a learned behavior, certain things are going to get you off. Well, now translate that to God. If you're struggling with feeling like God has what's best for you, it's going to be really hard to trust him. And I say this from personal experience.
Yeah.
It is very difficult to trust God in a season where I feel like he has let me down.
Right.
Now, you did say something else in here about God not failing us. And that's one of those things that, unfortunately, he's got more time than we're willing to give him a lot of the time. And which is why you then, because this all ties together, say Jesus always comes through when you're waiting on him.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we waiting on him? Because generally we're ready for him to do the shit before he's ready to do it.
Yeah.
It's like your wife getting ready to go out to dinner.
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to be sitting there waiting. You're going to have your shoes off. She's going to come out of the bathroom. She's going to go, what, you're not ready?
Yeah.
Because like by the time that she shows up and she's ready, it's like, you didn't even put your shoes on?
Yeah.
Dude, you've been telling me you've been waiting this whole time, and now that the blessing's here, you haven't done jack squat for it? Put your damn shoes on.
Yeah, bro. I hear you. Yeah. What
God bothers me sometimes. Yeah. And by sometimes, it's like 23 hours a day.
Yeah.
Pissing me off.
So, with that, one thought is we're waiting on our human time, right?
Yeah. Dog years.
Yeah. When God's time is eternal, it's kind of like, it's really hard to wait. And the second thought I had about that is I can equate that to like military stuff. And the reason why I was able to come back to God and write this chapter, even though it was hard, is some of the things that I've been in the military were extremely hard. And I'm going to tell you, like, I went, when was this? 1999, 1998. So back then, I went through rehab after I crashed my mom's car. Went through rehab for 4 months, from January to April. And when you go through the military rehab, it has to stick, or else you get chaptered out of the military for failing to adapt. And they'll be
Yeah.
watching you, and you relapse the military, you're out. So, the Albania thing was kicking off, and Russia was taking over this air base and all this stuff. And they were picking like the people that they wanted to take, and I was selected to be the commander's driver. And they were like teaching me like all the satellite communication stuff I knew nothing about. And they brought in all these top dignitaries. They're telling you like, man, your stuff doesn't stink. You're the best thing. It's like they made it sound like you walked on water because they know what you were about to do.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there. I'm just like, what did I say? I said to my commander, it's like, do I have a choice here? Are they selling me on this? He's like, well, you really don't have a choice. I'm like, then why did you do all this stuff? Why are all these people here? He's like, well, this is kind of a risky mission. You're going into a airfield that's occupied already. I'm like, oh, okay. So, and I'm just like shaking my head, and it's like that was the most miserable deployment I've ever been on in my life. Is trying to take over an airbase occupied by someone else, and there was mud everywhere, and it was in monsoon season in Albania.
And you're trying to stay sober for the first time.
And I'm trying to stay sober for the first time, and there was a guy that's trying to show his gratefulness to me because the southern part of the airfield was all farmland, and it was this one farmer, and he's trying to show his gratitude to me for giving his farm back to him. His how old is his daughter? Like 5 or 6 years old. I see his daughter chasing a chicken and like breaks the chicken's neck, slaughters the chicken, like is like defeathering it right in front of me. He's like, hey, why don't you come over to our house tonight? We're gonna have chicken. I came over to their house, and I've never seen that happen before. I'm from freaking Minneapolis.
Yeah.
So I'm going to this guy's house. He prepares this meal for me, and the interpreter's sitting like right next to me. He's like, hey man. I just looked at him. I said, I don't think I can eat this chicken. I saw them, defeathered it. And he looks at me and says, I don't think you understand. He's trying to bless you in this for what you've done for him. I said, this is his only chicken that he had, and he's making it for you. And I'm just sitting there to myself. I was like, okay. And I say all that to say, number one, if your intentionality, you got to be talked into it, it's not going to be worth it, right?
Yeah.
And it may be even a long time for you even believing where you're going, that you may even see a little bit of success, and trust me, like Albania, you know what their main export is? Frogs.
I was going to say, it's definitely not chickens.
Yeah, it's frogs, that they're extremely poor country, and I'm getting a blessing eating their only chicken that I'd seen their daughter defeather it, and they're just smiling that they're eating fresh chicken. Don't get me wrong, it was like super fresh chicken. It was really good the way that they prepared it. But I'm like, man, come on. But seeing victories in the place where you're miserable is kind of like, it's a tough thing to crawl out of, especially like I understand like what you're saying, because when I moved to Troy, Missouri, it took me 4 years to be comfortable with myself, even, and starting to go forward. That was hard. Trust me, in Albania, when I was there, miserable, freaking raining every day. And then when it got done raining, it was freaking hot, and then it was dusty. It was horrible. You couldn't win. You couldn't win at all.
Albania, visit today.
Yeah. Get your frogs, bro.
Come over. We've got some good frogs. I think there's like a brand of gummy worms or gummy bears called Albanese. I guess they're not making those.
No, probably not.
I don't even know if Albanese is the correct.
Yeah, I don't know.
Albanians?
No, Albanians. That could be.
Oh man. Yeah. All of that reminds me of just my trip to Peru, and they killed the pig in front of us on a missions trip one time.
Yeah.
And a lot of people couldn't eat the pig.
Yeah, I mean, it's like,
die.
yeah.
Yeah. That's what I started thinking of when you were doing that. But it's like the idea that now that I think about it, that was their only pig.
Mm-hmm.
That was, a huge thing for them to give up their pig. And we don't think about it that way a lot of the time. Like what I think a lot of the time intentionality is not really considered for what is this person giving up to give to me?
Yeah.
We were out there doing trick or treating the other night, and I saw how much candy these kids got when we got back to Stobart's house. And look, if you go to the store right now,
You know,
candy's really expensive.
yeah. Do you know, like, Eli did trunk or treating at church? He did, he goes to St. Stephen's now for his preschool.
Yeah.
He only did trick or treating at 2 houses. This dude came back. He has 2 huge bowls of candy.
Yeah.
I'm just like, sorry,
Well,
bro.
and like a thing of candy, like a 96-piece thing of candy for giving away is like $25 right now
Yeah.
at the grocery store. So these kids come back with 150 pieces of candy. They basically got like $30 worth of candy. While each individual's house is only giving out a piece or two, it all adds up. And it's like that idea is, if you expect one house to dump a whole thing of candy, they're giving up a lot. They're giving up 20 something dollars just to you.
Yeah.
But you scatter that $20 over hundreds of kids and it feels a little bit different. And it's a kind of that way with the people, with the time, with the resources. It's like if you can't just rely on yourself. You can't just expect one person to be where you got to be able to lean on multiple people. You got to be able to spread yourself out to multiple people. And that's a skill that you learn, and I'm learning still. But I think really, on my podcast that I do separate from this, I had Phil Sofield. I was just thinking about Josh Silver, and we talked about trust. And it's something I really struggle with because I've got like what I call the elephant brain. It's like I don't forget things, and if you slight me, I'm going to cut you.
Yeah. Trust is, I don't want you to lose that train of thought, but trust is really a big issue with me. And especially like when I was trying to put myself together, I had to lose like some of the stuff where I was that I could actually trust God again, because, man, I tell you what, when you're in a place where you're not good, it's like, man, I don't know if I can feel it.
Yeah.
And even trusting people, like what you're about to say, is like, man, it's tough, man. It's like you're in a tough place and people are trying to speak life into you. And it's like, man, I don't know if I can listen to that. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So when it comes to trusting people, he said something to me when how me and Phil kind of became friends was we were out on a hike one day, and it's, when you're a guy, look, this is ADHD for you, by the way. So one thought leading to the previous thought to the previous thought. Now I'm
Dude, the scrolls in your brain are like,
yeah. Jesus Christ. I feel retarded. I'm gonna get canceled for the R word. Okay, Phil, hiking, ADHD,
squirrels.
Yeah. So Phil and I out on a hike, and this is where I was getting to when I was stepping back. As a guy, I know this sounds weird, but when you're not from an area, it can be a little hard to make friends.
Mm-hmm.
So generally what ends up happening is you become friends. You pick a few of the husbands of the friends of your wife.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them aren't douchebags. Some of them are. But anyways, Phil's a good one, I guess. But Phil's like the complete opposite of anyone who I would ever choose to hang out with on my own. So like learning to trust him was really tough to like have somebody to talk to and be a friend with.
Mm-hmm.
But he said something very profound when we were on a hike one time. So look, I made it back. I asked him because he's gone through, and he wouldn't mind me sharing this because he shared it on my podcast. His first fiance girlfriend, he caught cheating on him with his best friend in his apartment in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Then he gets saved, finds a new girl, ends up knocking her up before they get married. They get married. things do not work out in that marriage because she's like seeing a coworker essentially, like kind of behind his back.
Yeah.
So like he's had these women betray him twice, and then he got remarried to Tabitha.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him, and I said, "How could you somehow figure out how to trust another person with so much of yourself
Mm-hmm.
after giving it away twice? Like, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, or fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me."
Yeah.
It's like, how can you go on? Like, how can you be okay with who you are after that's happened?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I don't have to trust the person, I have to trust God. Whereas in the past, it was never really trusting God, it was trusting the person.
Yeah.
And while I still hate him for that, it was, like I said, it was very profound, and it's caused me to think a lot. And we talked a lot about trust on that, but that's where it gets tough for me. Is like,
Yeah.
I'm supposed to trust the person who I don't trust,
Right.
but I should trust.
Yeah.
And if I don't trust him, is that my fault? Obviously,
Yeah.
because the presupposition to trust in that person is that he's always good.
Yeah. I think it's kind of difficult, especially you mentioned Phil, and then you're mentioning like where you are. I guess for me, I think it was easier for me to trust God and go through this if I mean, I've been deployed 8 times, and all 8 times they sucked, right? But I trusted God to get me back, and let me tell you, I've been in some very particular situations that I didn't think I'd make it out, and I think leaning on that understanding is easier to come back to, like, okay, God, I can trust you. I mean, what happened to Phil never happened to me, so
Yeah.
I can't speak to that, but what I can speak to is, my personal situations and what God has brought me through,
Yeah.
and sometimes for me, it's harder because, man, I look at it because the easy things that most people say is easy, I think are hard, when it comes to feelings and emotions. And, we talked about this upstairs. I don't like to read. I have people like message me in the morning about looking up Bible verses and asking me what they think. That is sometimes how I get my God's word into me, because people are asking me questions, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
And then coming back to this trust thing, man, it's hard to trust. Trust is like one of those things, especially when your trust is broken. What do you do with that, really?
Yeah. So, what's the point of asking questions if you don't have a little philosophical debate of trying to solve them?
Yeah.
I think that where a lot of people go wrong is either not asking the question or only asking the question.
Yeah. Yep.
You got to ask and answer. So, the reason why we call it the Socratic method is because that was what Socrates did. He sat down with a group of smart dudes and they just asked questions. And then they talked out the answers to those questions.
Yeah.
So, how do you trust someone in a situation of life where you don't inherently feel like you can trust people? Now, one thing that has worked for me, and especially with somebody like Phil, is what I just call the cursory test.
Mm-hmm.
And that's telling them something about yourself that is I don't want to say polarizing, and it's not to trauma dump on these people, but be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And don't try to be who you think they want you to be. And if they still want to hang out, they still want to do something,
Yeah.
then that's a good start.
Yep.
But if you feel like, I can tell you this, if you feel like you have to be a certain person in a relationship to have it, it's not going to be a good relationship. And this goes starting with your parents, probably.
Yeah.
If you feel like you have to be a different person around your parents, Like for me, I vape. I don't do it in front of my parents. Now, is that necessarily me being a different person?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, but it's more of I respect my parents and they don't like it, and it's easier to not.
Yeah.
I still do it when they're here. I just,
Yeah.
not in front of them. I try not to cuss in front of my parents.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm still me. I just try to alter my behavior a little bit to make them more comfortable. Now, that's why they're my parents, though,
Yeah.
and they're not my friends.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I got to be honest with you when I'm speaking about ministry specifically. When I got out of the military and we lived in Georgia,
yeah,
a really bad habit that I developed is I was retired, so I was off during the day, and I would literally do anything that the pastor wanted because I needed stuff to do.
I
And I did,
guess, man.
yeah, and I just I did whatever I could, and
Mm.
and then I moved to Missouri, and I did the same thing that people wanted to hear, and I will say I was kind of like I wasn't being true to myself. I was just saying yes to, keep on going, and the intentionality was not there. It was just like, I'll do whatever, and I guess my expectation of me doing like all this stuff didn't like manifest out to where I thought it would go, and then
Mm-hmm.
I had to make the choice of when I was putting my life back together, do I trust God in this, or am I doing the opposite here? And I think that's very interesting, like what you said, because I wasn't being true to myself. I was just like serving as hard as I could, and I thought something would manifest.
Yeah. I wrote down something here because I didn't want to forget the thought because you hit it without saying the exact thing that I always tell people.
Yeah.
Are you staying busy or are you staying productive?
Yeah.
We a lot of the time will choose busyness over productivity because busyness at least makes us feel like we're doing something.
Yeah.
Because we're accomplishing a lot of things. But are we actually accomplishing something that puts us towards a goal? And
Yeah.
that's the difference between being busy and being productive. Like you were doing all these things for this ministry,
Yeah.
but they weren't serving anything other than the duty checked.
Yep.
And that's when it starts to become a religious activity. Is like the reason why I struggle with reading my Bible is because reading my Bible to me feels like a have to, not a get to.
Yep.
And the reason it feels that way is because it goes back to what we've talked about in earlier podcasts. There's like this duality within me that while I know
Mm-hmm.
I'm saved by grace, it feels like I'm saved by the actions that I do.
Yeah.
And that if I don't act a certain way, I'm not doing it the right way.
Yeah. It's kind of like the whole intentionality about grace that we talked about upstairs.
Yeah.
He's like, God, give me grace, 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 grace. He's like, well,
Yeah.
then what am I doing here?
Yeah, not to bounce to another thought, but we'll bounce to grace a little bit here. This is something that I said maybe on this podcast before, but like grace and forgiveness are not the same thing.
Right.
And the reason why I think I said this is I talked about that. Well, how many times should I forgive my brother? 70 times 7,000 or whatever it was.
Yeah. He could like 490 or whatever. Yep.
Well, the thing is 7 times 70 times. Yeah, 490. Well, he doesn't say how many times do I keep extending grace to my brother.
Mm-hmm.
Because like at a certain point, the grace then goes back to that. If you have a disagreement with your brother, give them grace and confront them.
Mm-hmm.
If they then deny it, give them grace again and bring a friend.
Yep.
If they then deny it a third time, give them grace one more time and take it to the church. And then from that point forward, grace shall no longer be extended. It doesn't say forgive them.
Yeah.
Forgiving them is a must. But the grace to extend out to let them be along in your life.
Right.
Like, that's why you look at that, your grace. Like, I'm graced by your presence. Like, people should be a blessing in your life, not a hindrance.
Mm-hmm.
And when they start being more of a hindrance, then you have to decide, do I need to keep giving them grace? You can
Yeah.
forgive somebody, but that doesn't mean you need to keep allowing them to need forgiveness.
You know, you want to know what's funny?
Let's hear it. I want to laugh.
What I thought was a hindrance before is now a blessing. Do you know why?
Hey-o, there's like a verse about that or something.
Yeah, but I realized like the people who have in my life now, who once told me difficult things, and I like hated them for it, is so much of a blessing now because of how I view it. You know, because like Zach would say something to me is like, you know, I'm just like, ooh, I don't know how I can take that, but I know he's telling me the truth. And there's a guy that I lift weights with on Thursday. He tells me the truth, but I know like Zach wouldn't tell me. Zach wouldn't just be an a-hole to me just to say something to me. He'd be like, "Hey man, I hate to tell you this, but this is how this is." And then I'll be like, I'll think about it. It's like, man, that's a hard thing to say, but I know Zach wouldn't just say something to me because Zach always has intention to when we have a conversation. And that's the same thing with like different people in my life. Sometimes like your perception has to change for, you know, where you're going.
Yeah.
Rarely, I mean, in my life right now, do I have people in my life what would just intentionally hurt my feelings? Because before I was like, I can't believe that they said that to me. And then Jamie like, well, what are you gonna do? I was like, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. Wait till Sunday, and then I'll do something on Sunday. It's like James like, would you just go ahead and apologize already? It's like, hey, they had that coming. Now let's go home.
I'm going to heap some hot burning coals on their head. Oh, man. You know, it's not, this goes back to that quote on my wall. Like, I'd rather somebody hate me and do something with their life than like me and do nothing.
Right.
I think, I forget who I kind of got that from. It's probably Goggins. Goggins seems like a pretty hateable person. But
he does, man. I mean, this guy gets hate, but
Yeah.
but to be honest with you, if you listen to the entire podcast, he's actually being honest.
Oh yeah. And that's the problem is honesty and directness is a lot of the time ascribed with being confrontational and kind of a dick. And that okay, so maybe it is, but at the same time like I don't want to be known as the dick. Like, I don't want to be known as the guy who's a pessimist. It's like, no, but the way that my brain functions is that I do him no favors by not telling him the truth, or at least the truth to the best of as I know it. And something I always try to add is the caveat of this is what I know now.
Mm-hmm.
That can change.
Yeah.
But I try not to speak about things that I know like as if I know them unless I've actually spent some time.
Yeah.
I have no problem saying I don't know.
Yeah.
Let me figure it out though. If
Yeah.
I'm interested. If I'm not interested, then I'll just say I don't know and leave it there.
Yeah.
Because I don't want your problem to be my problem.
Yeah. You know, I just got one more thing that I think I'm going to say, and I'll let you end this podcast. When me and Zach, when we do this podcast, I'm not trying to be like super religious because I think, you know, I want people to figure out because your mental health and your recovery and where you're going in your life is, you know, really like your personal journey. But I will say this. I view like a lot of my journey is like the work I put in relationships now, you know. Like I think like one of the highlights of my week is when I could come here before the podcast and I can sit down with Zach and he'll just say, "This is what's going on," you know, whatever. And it's such a refreshing conversation because Zach is just being real, you know. And then when my life is going on now, it's kind of like so Rocky's my master handler, the one who helped me train Rocky, his name is Jason Howe, and he said he has this quote. He said, "In life, you always have to continue to take the stairs because it's worth it. Because if you continue to take the elevator, will you get to the same destination? Yes.
Yeah.
But if I continue to take the stairs with Rocky and we continue to train every single day, Rocky will be better for it. And I always
Yeah.
I looked at like my life right now. I appreciate the people who are honest with me. I appreciate the relationship I have with Jesus. I appreciate like all this stuff. And that is because, you have to continue to put the work in and you have to continue to stay on the same path. And it's kind of like what we said before. It's like, I really don't want to go back to where I came from, but that's just where I am. And it's such an appreciation now because I'm around people who put intentionality into the relationships that I have. And it's just like, you know, maintenance is sometimes harder than the rest. So,
Mm. I don't think I have to give that same caveat. I think most people are not questioning if I'm religious. I think most people are like, is that guy even saved? Is he even, what is his problem?
Yeah,
He's a dick.
I get that sometimes though too.
Yeah. I try not to just dump problems through this podcast, but I also try to get people to think about things and understand that not everyone has such an easy time with what you might have an easy time with. Like my wife has this incredible gift of faith, of just like knowing that God's going to somehow follow through.
Yep.
I have less than the mustard seed because I ain't moving anthills.
Yeah.
Let alone mountains. And where I really struggle with that is like faith is kind of the crux of everything that there is in Christianity. Everything in the Bible is that it's all taken on faith. Just as much as that if you don't believe that there's a God or anything or an atheist, that it's like it's what Terrence McKenna said, you grant me one miracle, the Big Bang, and we have all this. So it's all predicated on a miracle. Either the miracle that God exists or the miracle that somehow something came from nothing.
Yeah.
Now, I try to put myself into the pathway of believing that there has to be something more because nihilism sounds depressing. But I don't like being the person who I am sometimes, which is why this podcast is helpful because I can share things and talk to you and that people can hopefully tune in and understand that what you're going through is it's not new. It might be a little different. Just like you were saying with Phil, I may not be able to know exactly what Phil went through, but I can empathize having gone through similar situations. That's why we share this. We know that not everyone's going to have had their wife cheat on them, or that not everyone's going to struggle with PTSD, or not everyone's going to have a drug issue, but like, what can you learn from the experiences that we're sharing, not to prop us up, but to help you out? Because I could care less if I couldn't care less.
Yeah.
If, I guess I would kind of care, like, if nobody watched these videos. I'm glad that people do watch them, but it's like, if 50 people were in the basement right now watching this,
it'd be very awkward.
But wouldn't we be pumped that 50 people wanted to show up and watch this?
Yeah.
But 50 people online seems like nothing because there's 8 billion. So
different perspectives.
Perspective and intentionality.
Yeah.
Words of the day.
You know what I find very ironic is, I guess I do have one more thing to say.
Let's hear it.
Is just like what you said about the perspective of 50 people watching. When I did group, I had an expectation of like all these people coming, like every single week. I had an expectation of every single person coming, and then I'd get like 8. But my expectation was I'd get 100. But to the point that I want to make right now is, if I had 8 people or if I had 100 people, I'd still try the same, and that's where I appreciate like Like when we did our very first one, like our very first one back in June, that has very like the video is poor and like all this stuff. You said something's like, if this helped one person, wouldn't you do it? I was like, yeah, I would do it. So
Yeah, I mean, because that's an important thing. Because I know people that do this, and it never takes off. And this may never take off. We may be posting this to an audience of, and what I mean by take off is we may not be meant to reach 1,000,000 people,
yeah.
but a few hundred.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if that's what it is, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Next week, we are going to be moving into number 11, camaraderie.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah, talk a little bit about having comrades wearing red.